So I'm really happy with this next call, and also having both of you in the call here. So we want to talk about the impact of AI on learning technology. So learning management system, learning experience platform, authoring tools, whatever. So in order to do that, we have Nelson on the show, Nelson Sivalingam. Do I pronounce it correctly, Nelson? I never pronounced your last name before.
Close, Sivalingam.
Sivalingam, okay. Nelson Sivalingam, now I know. So Nelson is the CEO of How Now, which is, I think, one of the learning environments that I really like, because it's a mix of an LMS and LXP. It has searches and a lot of interesting features, uses AI, for example, to scrape the web, to get profiles on skill sets and stuff like that. So I think a forward-thinking leader in my mind. So so we want to sort of pick your brain on that, Nelson. I will also be participating in this discussion from my role as being the co-founder of VC Generator and being responsible for like the future direction of the tool. So that is about authoring and learning as well. So and in order to sort of guide us in the right direction, we invited Louise Puddifoot for this call. And Louise is somebody that we work with already for a longer period. So she's the co-founder and director of Willow and Puddifoot. And I know Louise as an L&D expert, as a trainer, a coach, and a great moderator. And the last thing is why we asked her for this session. So Louise, maybe first, Nelson, can you give yourself a short introduction, and then I will hand it over to Louise for an introduction, and then take it from there.
Sure, Kasper, I feel like you did such a good job. There's not much more I can add, but like you said, I'm one of the founders and the CEO at How Now. Maybe a bit on How Now for those of you who've not heard of How Now. Essentially, many of you may have worked in companies where kind of L&D is looked at almost like an interruption from unwanted, from busy work. And we essentially help you take it from an interruption and turning it into an integrated part of everyday work. And how we do that is by using AI to connect the right learning to the right person based on the skills gaps they have at the right time in the flow of work. So you're getting significantly higher engagement in learning than you would from a traditional learning platform. I'm also the author of Learning at Speed, which kind of looks at mental models and frameworks you can use within your organization to accelerate the speed of your learning. And if you haven't listened to it, I'm also the co-host of L&D Disrupt, where we bring in disruptive thinkers like the people I'm sharing on my panel. We bring them, pick their brain on a podcast to talk about what the future direction of L&D is. So if you haven't checked that out, do check it out. Thanks for having me.
And you're welcome. Okay, so then we hand it over to Louise. Can you start with a small introduction of yourself and then taking it from there, Louise?
Hi, sure. Thanks, Kasper. So my background, probably like lots of the people in the audience today, is working in learning development in corporate. I led various functions in learning and development in corporate over my career. For the last 5 years or so, I've run a training company called Willow and Puddifoot, and we provide management and leadership development, personal effectiveness, well-being training and coaching and things like that, and really interested in the whole AI journey and how we capitalize on that and use that in the learning that we do. So really excited to get to pick the brains of Nelson and Kasper today and learn a lot from them. So if we start with the big picture, Nelson and Kasper, how about we start by hearing from you on what you think the impact of AI is on corporate learning generally, kind of now, year into the future, 3 years into the future, what are you seeing? Let's start with you, Nelson.
Well, I think the immediate impact we're seeing right now is probably an explosion of mediocre content, right? Because what generative AI has done is basically reduce the friction for us to be able to create content. And that doesn't mean the fundamentals are gone anywhere, right? There's still a question around, is there a problem we're trying to solve? Is a course the right answer? There are all of these things, but all of a sudden what we've done is we're drawn to this shiny new toy, and what we're doing is asking ChatGPT to create a lot more content, or any AI tool for that matter, to create a lot of content that might not be solving the problem, but faster. And I think we're kind of overlooking the fact that content was never the problem, right? Content, we're living in a post-content world where content is cheap and abundant. And actually the bigger challenge in a world like this is discovery. And in actual fact, what we're doing for ourselves in the near future is making discovery even harder by bringing more content into the space. So I think the immediate impact is, let's use this to do the same things we've always been doing. But I think once we pass that period, we'll then start to really ask the questions around, okay, actually, this thing can do a lot. What are the actual problems that were very difficult to solve for, that we can start to use AI for? And I think over the next 12 months, what we'll start to see is really AI have an impact on upskilling and reskilling, and looking at this idea of, if you're an organization who's on a journey to becoming a skills-based organization, there's a lot of the friction involved in that journey that AI can reduce in that journey there. And maybe we can talk a bit more about that, but I think that will have a big impact. And also fundamentally, I think by the end of next year, every employee will have their own personalized coach in their hands. And I think we're moving to that very quickly. It's a coach who will know your skills profile. It's a coach who will know learning resources that can best support you. So I think we'll start to see the move there. 3 years, I mean, given the level of disruption and change you've seen in the last 12 months, I think anyone trying to predict the next 3 years is insane, but I'll give it a go. I think what we will see is actually, I think a lot of agents, and for those of you who are not necessarily following the move of what's happening in AI, an agent is essentially a bot, if you will, powered by AI that is able to connect multiple steps to create a workflow. So if I said, book me a holiday within this budget that meets all of these requirements, it will do all of the steps involved in doing that end-to-end process. Now, apply that within every workflow within the workplace, your agents will be able to do a lot of that. Now, naturally, what that's going to do is a lot of jobs are going to be lost to these agents that are going to do this. However, new jobs are going to be created, which means there's going to be a bigger imperative on reskilling rather than upskilling. I think over the course of the next 3 years is the only thing I think I can kind of say is likely to happen given what we've seen.
Makes sense. Thanks, Nelson. Kasper, how would you add to that?
Yeah, so I think indeed the focus is very much on content creation based on generic content like ChatGPT does, because that's what we see in front of us. And I agree, especially for corporate learning, you need to have specific information. So that is the challenge. So I think that the change that's up on us is that the technology behind it is really powerful. So it can do a lot of stuff. And it's not only like course creation, but I thought passing by in the chat in the previous session. So there is, what's the name of the tool from Josh Bersin created, what's it, Galileo it's called. Yeah, so what he did basically, uploaded his whole archive of content into an AI engine. So it now has a lot of L&D knowledge, so you can start asking questions. That at least solves a couple of the problems we have with the lousy content, because it's actually actionable content. It's content you can ask. So it is in terms of Nick, it's information that you can pull from it, but also information you can trust, and you can actually see the sources. So I think that on the short term, we're going to sort of solve the problems we have with the generic content from ChatGPT and make it more worthwhile. So I think that's what's happening over the next 12 months or so. And I agree with Nelson that the longer future is all about skills. So I really think that it would be that the whole of AI, if you would have that specific information at your fingertips, then indeed it will change corporate learning. And it needs to be information that you can use in the flow of work, that you can use. The actual learning, proper learning will change your behavior. So it either teach you new behavior or new skills, or it will change something that you did before in a different way. So I think that we need to go there, but that's also like the harder thing, especially when you want to learn online. That is harder, and I think that's the beauty of it. I think it will push it back to a blended model, where now a lot of corporates are sort of relying on online methods. I think that basically you have to go back. So in the medieval ages, we had like the apprentice master model, where you had a master teaching you. And I think that online learning can help you do a lot of things and can help you learn, but you actually need somebody in your job as a mentor, as a coach, as a master, to help you apply that and become better at it. So I think we go back to sort of a blended model, maybe even, but really much skill based.
Excellent. That's interesting. Thank you. So we're going to kind of move from mediocre generic content to more specific and useful content. We're going to need to think about reskilling as jobs evolve, and we're going to have more of a need for that actual human interaction in the blended content as we kind of take learning to the next level, making the most of the AI tools properly. Great. Thank you. So if we take it down a level now and think about the own tools that you're responsible for, Kasper, you're obviously responsible for Easy Generator, an e-learning tool. Nelson, How Now, an LXP tool. Let's hear from you in terms of your own tools. What impact has the launch of AI, and I'm sure ChatGPT a year ago in particular, had on your own tool? Let's start with you this time, Kasper.
Yeah, I think the impact will be huge. So I think that we are already using AI as to help people create better content, faster content. So especially for Easy Generator, that is a big thing, because with these generators, subject experts are creating learning content. So they don't have an educational background. And with AI, but also you have to add didactical knowledge to the equation as well. You can actually help them do a better job. You can actually build sort of like an instruction designer into the tool that helps a subject expert to do a better job. Content generation could be another thing. If you have a specific database like Josh Bersin is doing, that could be interesting, but then probably more in direction of performance sport. And I think that is for Easy Generator something that we are actually already experimenting with. So how can we use that information? And I know that both Nelson and I use the word corporate brain in our talks and our books every now and then. But if you would actually have an AI database with all the knowledge and all the experience of your company, it would not, it could serve a couple of purposes. So one would be just knowledge retention, so that knowledge doesn't go away if people leave your company. The other one would be potentially course generation, but in my mind, that would be like a draft course for somebody to finish off. And the other thing, of course, is performance sport. So embed learning into the flow of work in a different way and a different way. So I think those things are happening as we speak, and I think that is like also what will impact our tool.
Yeah. Great, thank you, Kasper. And I know the tool has had a lot of AI built into it already, hasn't it? That's been very successful.
Yeah, we will show that, by the way, in the next session when we talk about
really?
AI.
Great.
Yeah.
Cool. Nelson, how has it impacted How Now? I think you're on mute, Nelson.
Yeah.
You should be able to now. So, you know, what we help companies do is, in essence, what I've seen in the chat, someone flagged, and Kasper mentioned it, around how Josh Bersin has introduced Galileo based on the kind of knowledge and learning that they've captured. Now, imagine being able to create a tool like that based on your organizational knowledge, right? Every internal expert, all of the knowledge and learning resources you have to be able to ask questions and be able to interact with that. That's in essence what we've used AI to create for organizations. But where we see looking forward, the impact is going to be is in a couple of things. I think the side effect of the explosion of kind of generative AI and ChatGPT is we're all getting very used to interacting with technology using natural language. And we're getting very used to the chat interaction with all of the tools and tech stack that we use. And I think we're going to start to see this disrupt every tech that we use within the workplace, where you're looking at either a chat first or something similar to that allows us to use natural language, not just from a discovery perspective of, you know, answering questions around what do I need to be learning to build skill X, but also to get actions done, right? It might be a case of create a learning pathway for me that's going to help me go from a skill 3 to skill 4 in leadership, for example. And I think everything we want to get done, we're going to expect to do it from asking in natural language. And I think that's going to be a significant side effect in How Now, but also other tools across HR tech and beyond. The other one is, one of the things we've always been very clear about is to take a integration-led approach. You're never really going to get one tool that does everything really well. And so our approach has always been to take a more Lego block approach, where you want to be that central Lego block, but you want to get the best of breed for every part of the problem that you want to solve, and build what you want with the Lego blocks you've got, rather than trying to carve what you need out of a monolithic rock. And the benefit of that is you get data from across the organization. Now, the shift that we're seeing with generative AI is we can now, in parallel, combine multiple data points. Like, imagine I can take data from your performance management system. I could take data from your CRM based on your sales performance. I can take data from who's been sending messages out of hours on Slack and email, so I can see who are the people who are overworking or burning out. I can then combine all three of those data points to create and segment a target audience and create a tailored learning experience for that target audience. You could do all of that with very, very minimal effort, because AI is doing the heavy lifting. And that's where we're heading to. We already have integrations with all of these different systems across your organizational ecosystem. Now it's looking at how can we use these data points to make it easier to connect people with the right learning at the right time. So yeah, we're excited for what it opens up, because I think it creates use cases that we weren't able to serve before that we can now with the advancement we've seen.
Yeah, it's amazing. Exciting future. So in a moment, we're going to share a survey with the audience where we want to ask you which topics you would like to pick the brains of Nelson and Kasper on next. So actually, we've taken these topics from the Global Sentiment Survey for Learning and Development that's run by Donald Taylor every year. And these are some of the key topics that are hot in L&D right now. Obviously AI is hot, which is why we're here talking about AI over the course of today and tomorrow. And other topics which were also hot in the survey were content creation, as Kasper has already spoken about a little, and performance support and LXPs that Nelson has spoken about a little as well. So we can also, whilst people are answering, take a moment, if you like, to talk a little bit more about any impact you expect on content creation, Kasper, more generally.
Oh, sorry, I was looking at
looking at the survey results.
Can you repeat the question?
Is there anything you'd like to add on the impact of AI on content creation more generally?
So, yeah, I think that as also Nick pointed out, there are already a couple of areas where AI is sort of already replacing content. And it's not always the best, but that's also maybe sometimes the case if humans create content. But I think that if you look at generic content creation, so if you talk about a lot of marketing information, stuff like that, I think AI can already do a good job. And I think in my mind that is a good thing, because if you think about it, I think that having generic courses created by people in your organization is not the most effective way of learning. So you can buy that stuff or have it generated by AI. So I think that is really interesting, that on a short notice, people are sort of becoming aware, wait a minute, are we doing the right things? And maybe not even that AI is taking over from them, but at least it gives us an example that that information is very cheap and readily available. So maybe you should focus on different topics if you talk about learning in the corporate environment.
Yeah, great. And I guess once people have those databases built of their own specific content for that organization, then we'll be able to use AI to create that specific content as well, and use it for company-specific content creation, right?
And then it becomes indeed more interesting. And then the question is, how will that database and the SMEs collaborate? Because in my mind, even then, AI still is a supportive technology that can create like maybe a draft course or draft resource. But I think it's really important that there's like somebody curating that. to see is it the right information and is it useful.
You're absolutely, it's a really powerful assistant, isn't it, to use the AI, but there's still a need to kind of ice the cake at the end and make sure that it works well and delivers what's needed.
Correct.
Thank you. So I think we've got most of the responses to the survey. Nelson, was there anything you wanted to add before we go to that in terms of the impact of AI on performance support? I know we've talked about natural language, people be expecting to use natural language and the integration of systems.
Yeah, I guess the only thing to add to it is, we often say internally that the best kind of search is no search, right? If your technology is really clever, then really we should be able to look at this data and predict what you're going to need. And I think if we extrapolate that, then really what learning is about behavior change. And what has been scientifically proven is nudges, the right kind of nudges delivered at the right time, are very effective at driving behavior change. And I think from a performance support perspective, that's what AI will allow us to do, is precisely give you exactly what you need to keep nudging you in the direction of that behavior change, and almost implement a feedback loop to see whether, all right, that first dose I gave you, has that driven the right behavior change? And maybe it will look at your productivity systems and performance data to see, are we moving in the right direction? And wait to see that data before it nudges you again with the right. So, right now we talk about, I know micro-learning is on the list of topics there, but we typically, when we refer to micro-learning, we go, it's not a big course, it's a small course. But I think what we're going to be looking at moving forward is more, I think, in the term of nudges, right? And that nudge could be anything from a chat with an internal mentor all the way to a blog that's worth you reading before you jump on that call as a first-time manager. And it's delivering that at the right time. And I think that's what we're going to see the big shift with, is AI being able to use your performance data to deliver tailored nudges to drive that behavior change.
Amazing. Yeah, it's really interesting thinking about the kind of micro level that's going down to, isn't it, of those nudges. And I think we've been talking also about personalization in the L&D industry for some years now, but this is really taking personalization right down to that very personal level and adapting it constantly over time as well.
Yeah.
Amazing. So looking at the results of the poll, gosh, it's close. We'll have to see if we can cover as many topics as we can of these in the next 15 minutes that we've got available. But the one with the highest number of votes is collaborative and social learning. So let's start with that. What will the impact of AI be, or is it now, on collaborative and social learning?
You want to take it first, Nelson?
Go on.
Yeah, happy to. What I'd also love to know from everyone who's voted for collaborative and social learning, I'd love to know the why behind it, right? Because it's quite interesting in a session where we're talking about AI. It's really great to see we're leaning on the human aspect of learning there, and that's the one that's been voted. So it's interesting to see that. So it'd be great if anyone can share their thoughts in chat. I think it's exciting for social learning and just learning communities in general, because I still think we're in the early stages. I'm not, I get to speak to many L&D teams and L&D professionals in what I do, and I don't really come across organizations who I think have cracked learning communities and social learning. And I think a lot of the hard work involved in that, again, AI can help with. But to play out a few interesting use cases of how AI can be applied, imagine you've got like a discussion forum, with comments and people asking questions. AI can now collect, analyze all of these comments and queries and questions, and generate a relevant learning pathway or learning experience directly addressing the comments and questions that are raised on these discussion forums and comments. And so you can really start to use the data that's buried in these communities and these discussion forums and Slack channels, etc., and start to use that as a way of identifying problem areas and gaps and be able to address them as quickly as possible by using AI to generate resources around that. So I think that will be something we'll start to see. Another one is, community isn't just about getting a bunch of people together, right? Often, as anyone who's run a peer-to-peer session will know, sometimes you need a really good facilitator to make sure people are having the right type of conversations. And I think actually AI will be able to play a pretty good role as a facilitator and to make sure we can facilitate the right type of discussions and questions and answers within a communicator. So I do think, you know, I just saw someone say AI could ever be social or collaborative. They don't believe that. It might not be social or collaborative, but it can definitely help us be more social and collaborative. And that's where I think AI could play a great role as a facilitator. And I think straight off the bat, and you probably see this as well, Kasper, sometimes the initial challenge to get internal experts to create content is a lot of organizations don't know who their internal experts are, right? And because often those knowledge exchange and knowledge transfer happens on tools like Slack, Teams, email, etc. But AI will be able to look at all of that data to help you identify who your subject matter experts are. So the next time when you have a question, they would be able to look at that data and be able to tell you, actually, these 4 people are the best people to answer that question for you. So I definitely think AI will play a significant role in reducing the friction for us to be more social and collaborative.
Yeah. Yeah, I think I was also surprised, positively surprised to see this as the #1, because also in the survey where we got it from, it wasn't the #1 by far. So it's interesting indeed that it's a human aspect. But I think that indeed, and along the lines of what Nelson said, so if I look more at the Easy Generator side where we create learning content and performance support content, then collaboration is crucial. So I experienced it firsthand. So I just announced that I wrote a book together with Friday, and I'm 100% certain that just me by myself haven't been able to write a book like that. And the same goes for her. But together we were able to do that, because if you bring that together, 1-on-1 is really more than 2. And I think that is one of the key things of AI that can actually bring people together. So if you talk about authoring in Easy Generator, for example, if I type in a title for a course that I want to create, it could actually sort of check out and say, wait a minute, Nelson's also creating a course on the same content, so maybe you should work together, or that course is already there, or so it can bring experts together. And with that, I think you get less content, but content of a higher quality. So I think that is one of the very, very simple things. Bringing people together, but also I think that in the end, and how that plays out, I don't know exactly, but also on the learner side, on the worker side, if people are able to share their experiences. And so what happens now, that happens, people are sharing experiences, but it's very much 1-on-1. So if I have a conversation with Nelson or with you, Louise, and you ask me a question, I give you an answer, you might learn from that, and the other way around. It's a 1-on-1 thing. So we use, for example, in Easy Generator, we use Slack a lot. And we are like now 200 people around that, but we're like globally scattered. So we have offices in the Netherlands, in Ukraine, in Dubai, in Colombia, and we have a lot of people working from home. So people are all around, so you need to collaborate. So Slack is like a crucial thing for us to work together. But it is where there is also where things come together. But always, if people ask questions on Slack, or most of the time, it's within a small group or it's 1-on-1. And if you can actually, with AI, get that information out and make it available to the others. So if I answer a question to somebody, that answer also becomes available for the rest of us. I think those are the things that which is really powerful. And AI will enable things like that.
Thank you. That's interesting. So AI is kind of enabling the whole process end to end. And I must admit, I hadn't particularly thought about the beginning bit where AI is helping us identify the subject matter experts in the beginning, and helping us recognize if we need to bring someone else into some content creation. So that's a really interesting way to think about it as well. But then it's bringing the right people in, then it's helping us actually facilitate the discussion, and then it might be sharing the outcome of that discussion with everyone else around. So the whole process.
And the interesting thing is, in all 3 elements that we're now describing, AI is not creating content. AI is actually bringing people together, facilitating learning, and things like that. So this is a really interesting conclusion.
Yeah, it's a really interesting use case, isn't it? That it's not necessarily the first one that comes to mind when we think about AI.
Correct.
Great, thank you. Right, I'm going to move on. Go on, Kasper.
Point, yeah, because what I see happening is that with AI, a lot of different industries are sort of moving in the same direction. So if you look at knowledge creation, if you look at tools that help you search the knowledge in your company, if your knowledge management tools, with AI, they all sort of are driven in the same direction of creating a central database which you can use for all kind of purposes. So that's really interesting. And the same thing is sort of happening also with that learning experience. So I think that it's really interesting that things are sort of merging together because of AI, and maybe it points us in the direction we should have gone in the first place. But it's really interesting. I don't know where this will take us, but I see that there's a lot of movement in different markets, and sort of people are sort of finding new ways. So interesting to see where that will be going. And one of the things that I also think is also from a theoretical point of view, things like community of practice. I think those are things that always were sort of for a part lacking practicality, because if you are dispersed like we are with these generator, it's very hard to do that. The online version. I think with AI, you actually can use the benefits of those kind of approach in combination to innovation, content creation, but also learning.
Yeah, it's interesting. It's going to make us more collaborative and more social.
Hopefully.
Yeah, the potential's there anyway. That's good. Okay, next topic. It was a tie, but we now have a winner at number 2 for micro-learning. So we're going to go to micro-learning. I know we talked a little bit about nudges already, and I know Nick Shackleton-Jones in the previous session was talking about resources, not courses. What else do you think is going to be the impact of AI on micro-learning?
I don't think.
Go on.
I was going to say. I was just going to say, Kasper, because I think micro-learning, I've always had a issue with this idea that, shorter content is better content. Is in essence when we're saying the trend and move to micro-learning, and I'm not too sure that is true, especially when we're talking about Kasper's upcoming book, and we're talking about, we're more than happy to sit there and read a long-form content like a book instead of reading a blog or watching a 5-minute video. And I think it really does come down to what the need is, and is this the relevant learning experience for that need? And so I almost feel like micro-learning was, I often say there are real trends and then there are real trends, right? Like, to give you an example, like the metaverse was a real trend, right? There's a lot of hype, a lot of money, a lot of propaganda around it. Not to say it will never have its moment, but it definitely didn't have its moment when everyone was talking about it over the last 24 months. And I think micro-learning, for me at least, is that kind of trend where it was in a shift where a lot of the e-learning that was out there was basically, gazillion hours long. And we thought the counter to that was, oh, no, what? Let's just turn gazillion hours into thousands of 5-minute segments that people need to watch. And actually, that's not we're not solving the problem, right? Because it might be fit for some cases, but in other cases, it might not be the right delivery format. So AI's impact is hopefully making us realize that we shouldn't just be like micro-learning is the way or whatever. It will definitely make it easier, because AI is going to make content creation easier. So it will make the creation and delivery of micro-learning a lot easier, like it would for everything else. But I think we need to step back and ask ourselves, why are we so obsessed with micro-learning and the length of content?
Yeah, good point.
Yeah,
go on, Kasper.
I think my first initial answer will be in line with that, because I think I learned that if we talk about words like micro-learning, so I talked to a lot of L&D managers, so I learned, so the moment that people use words like that, I now ask them, okay, what do you mean by it? Because I discovered that we use the same words for very different things very often. So half of the population, probably a bit more, are using it like Nelson is now using it. So micro-learning is just a shorter form of a course. So it's maybe 5 minutes max. But there's also a group that will also know micro-learning is the learning that you actually can apply. So it's learning on the job. So learning nuggets, so which is sometimes another word for micro-learning, but it's small nuggets that you can actually use while you're working. You encounter a problem, you have like a small piece of content that will help you out, and you can continue with your work. So it goes much more in the direction of performance support. So that is really interesting, because if it's that, that is much more in line with what Nelson said, and it could solve the problem because it's learning in the flow of work. But even if you do look at learning as like a course or a training, and you have like a module or a course which is like a big one, and a micro-learning which is, let's say, for argument's sake, is like a 5-minute learning piece, then even with AI, it can become interesting, because if I would have indeed, let's say a sort of like a specific chat GPT function available while I'm working. So I have a question, I type it in, I get my answer. I have a problem, I type it in, and I get my solution. So then I can continue to work. But very often that will not be the case, because sometimes it will touch on a more generic topic. So we talked a bit about compliance training. It's always been used like as the excuse for LMD. Okay, we need to push training to the people because they need to do that. But the thing is that maybe you only need it when you really need it, in your moment of need. So when I'm working and I'm asking a question on something which is like a compliance related issue, it can tell me that this is how it works. But if you want to continue, probably you want to dive in a bit deeper and know the specifics of that before you do it. And then maybe it can actually point me towards a small micro-learning on that specific topic. So I learn that in the context of the problem I have. So it's just more than like a question and answer. So it's like a learning moment, but in the context of work. So then I think micro-learning could actually be different and be something in between a learning experience and a performance support thing.
Yeah. So AI is going to help us make micro learning, if we're allowed to call it that, much more relevant and much more appropriate.
Correct. I saw a bit of doubt on your face, Nelson, correct? When I was talking, do you disagree, or did I read your face?
No, not at all. I think it's what you're saying, Kasper, is what I definitely agree is where the problem that is the discovery problem. Right, is the idea, regardless of what the length of the learning resource or experience is am I able to find exactly what I need precisely in that moment, right? And so it's not that we now need to all create, let's say for argument's sake, 10-minute courses, because take Kasper's example, you could still create a 5-hour course, but if you've got AI to search and find the exact bit that's relevant for your moment of need, then it doesn't really matter whether the initial course that you created was 10 minutes long or 5 hours long, right? And I think it comes back down to how can we enable you to discover, which I think is a really important point, especially for compliance, because in a lot of organizations, we look at compliance as tick box exercise, but actually it's there for a very important reason, to make sure we are all behaving in an ethical and law-abiding way. So it's a significant behavior change we need to see to make sure people are abiding by that. Yet, most companies have very difficult to navigate e-learning courses where, let's face it, just getting an employee to go through it once is hard enough. They're never going to go back and revisit it to know, what am I supposed to do in this moment again? It's not easy enough for them to revisit. And so I think definitely AI-enabled discovery can help us find exactly what we need in that moment of need, which takes away this pressure of having to author small or short content.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. So we've only got a couple of minutes left, but I'd like to just close quickly with the final topic in the list, because it was reskilling and upskilling that came third in the list. And I think that's really appropriate because we've heard a lot today about how reskilling is going to be really important as AI changes the nature of jobs. So do you want to just give kind of your headline answer in the time we've got left as to what impact you think AI will have on that reskilling process? Should we start with you again, Nelson?
Yeah, so I think this is something where we are using AI right now to help companies we work with become skills-based organization. I'll quickly break down how we're using AI to do that. The first part of the problem with upskilling and reskilling is you need to know what skills should this person have in the first place. And this is what you call the skills mapping challenge, right? The mapping job roles, or more importantly, mapping each individual to the skills they should have and the skills they currently have. So we use AI right now, and we use a large language model made out of real-time job market data to identify what the most in-demand skills are for any particular job role. We then combine that with any of your previous work history data, and we use AI to infer what skills have you possibly acquired based on the work history that you have. We combine that data to essentially say, here are the skills that we think each individual in your company has. Now, that in itself, if you imagine, years ago, that would have been a consultant spending 12 months in your company to map it out manually, and it will sit in an Excel file. So I think that's a big part where AI can help us with the skills mapping. The second one is, great, they should have these skills, but to what level of mastery do they have those skills? This is where AI can look at the performance data in your organization to start giving you an assessment of, on a 5-level proficiency scale, based on the performance data, we think this person is free. So you're really looking at data to verify what skill level you think this person's at. And the third and final one, talking about reskilling, is how do you identify emerging skills? We often talk about looking at data that's historic, but actually using AI, we can start to predict. We can look at macro trends. Right, let's just take AI. If AI is a trend that's going to boom over the next 5 years, what are the implications on the job market? What's the implication on the roles that exist and the roles that don't? And this can start to give you predictions around emerging skills and tell you what you should be learning based on those emerging skills. So there's the 3 areas we use AI to talk about, what skills you should have, what skills you currently have, and how do you bridge that gap between those 2 areas.
Powerful stuff.
Yeah, certainly. Yeah, and maybe to add to that, so we already covered a bit about skills, that the skill gap, finding that, but also different kind of content you need to have. But I think there might be a really interesting opportunity coming out of that skills, and AI can actually help us bring that together. Because one of the things that we have, so we have like a few thousand companies working with CC Generator, and one of their main concerns is make sure that the other company can't see my content because it's specific and it's my domain, and I don't want the competitor to see what I have. I think that skills by itself are much more generic. So how you actually use them in your organization might be different. So the instructions will be different. So I think that there might be an opportunity for companies actually to work together by creating like a sort of a generic skills training set that everybody can use, and also looking ahead, making sure that the skill sets is there that we need for the future. And really interesting, just to touch on, so there's a project called ERT, the European project, and it's the 60 largest companies in Europe working together. And they do a couple of things together. But one of the things that they said, well, we have a problem with upskilling and reskilling. So on one hand, we see there are people who are unemployed because they currently do not have the skills to find a job. On the other hand, we have jobs and we can't find the right people. We also see a relatively large group of people who is in risk losing their job because they are not able to catch up with the new skills they need to acquire to keep their job. So they actually wanted the 60 companies to train and develop 5 million people before 2030 and actually give them a job. That is really interesting because you see companies working together and learning, sharing information, sharing experience, looking ahead. And I think if you could do that, and I think AI can actually facilitate that, and AI can make that possible. So I think it could be really cool to look at things like that and maybe, well, make the world a bit of better place by sort of people collaborating on things like that, and instead of protecting everything they have, sort of sharing more. And you see it happening in the educational world more and more, that universities work together on programs. It would be great if we could have like a universal skill program to actually train people, and that we maintain that with everybody, and everybody can actually use that.
That would be amazing. Thank you, Kasper. So I know we're at time, so I want to say thanks very much to Nelson and Kasper for sharing their insights and expertise with us today. And I'll hand back to you, Molly.